the Maori people, who for generations have owned the island, it had always been a miniature Garden of Eden, sheltering rare native bats, large insects and lizards, and countless birds. The teeming bird life had always been its greatest glory. Vast numbers of common bush birds shared its richness with species which had disappeared everywhere else. The food-rich ocean also attracted a multitude of seabirds, like these sooty shearwaters, or mutton birds. These still arrive in their millions for the breeding season and nest in burrows on the island. But they now come ashore to a place which has suffered a terrible change. Big South Cape had been a place of beauty and vitality, perhaps a mirror of what the whole of New Zealand once was. Colourful birds like this red-crowned parakeet were everywhere in abundance. A few of the mutton birders who return each year for the season to harvest some of the young shearwaters for food can still recall those idyllic days.
One of the great things I think of down there is the naturalness of the place. There are no vermin of any kind. The birds were natural, they weren't timid, they come right to you, friendly. And it was really a little paradise on its own. And that's the biggest effect it had on us, was the number of birds we had there. And after the rats came, and when the place was empty, and we've still got that feeling of loss now, of what we had and what it is today. Because everything was there, and people just took it for granted. Until the rats came, we didn't realize what we had until the rat did come.
The large green skink was then a familiar companion around the living houses. The place can never be the same without him. Away from the buildings, the giant-leaved bunui no longer shelters a rustling variety of insect and bird life, and the forest gecko no longer clings to the trunks of the tupari trees. No more bellbirds call in the bush. This unique snipe, who existed nowhere else in the world, now exists nowhere. One bird, though, was missed most of all by the families of mutton birders who lived closely with him. He was their bird, existing only on Big South Cape and the two tiny islets of Pukaweka and Solomon, just offshore to the north. The cheeky and sociable South Island saddleback rummaged everywhere for his insect food, but he was just as much at home perched inside a hut or working house, or nestled in the pocket of a parka. His sudden absence from the buildings was like losing a family pet.
The effect on the bird life was really shocking. Yellow-headed parakeets, and all their numbers, they went very quickly. Well, the cocky robin, he'd be the first one to go. Well, I'd say the wren would be the first. He just disappeared overnight, actually. The mutton bird's always been a natural food of the people. One of the great things about it seems to keep the families together. You know, they keep their interest in the island. They all know each other. They're all pretty good.
The families who processed these mutton birds were following generations of tradition. As a food, the bird is also traditional. Along with certain shellfish and vegetables, it is a part of Mauritania, and for generations the saddleback had looked on.
Saddleback, he used to nest. You get into a place, he'd nest inside, you know, pretty much like a starling.
And renewing a unity with past and present. And children who must miss some formal schooling gain an education in a natural world, which is also a Maori world. In the early 1960s, tragedy struck. Ratus, the ship rat, made its way to Big South Cape. It was the worst biological disaster to strike any island in New Zealand during this century.
In the very early 60s, the fishermen reported rats on the island, and although we believed it, we never expected to see anything. What really happened, the whole place was infested, one end of the island to the other, and well, the three islands had the saddlebacks on them, so the three islands were infected, and where it struck us, for a start, mostly was in the houses, the living houses, where we left all our boys being able to leave our gear behind and come back next year. It was all right. This time the rats had gone right through the lot. What they didn't eat, they destroyed. The bedding, they nested in it, fouled that up. The wallpaper, they chewed that as far as they could to get the flour paste behind it. Everything they could get out, they really chewed it up. That's where we really noticed it. There was plenty of food around that time. They didn't seem to touch the vegetation at that time.
But that vegetation too was in line for destruction. Once it had been like an overstocked natural aviary. 7 or 8 bird species could have been seen in a single tree, and the sheer numbers would have astounded anyone accustomed to the New Zealand bush as we know it today. Suddenly, that vast population was diminished to a scattered few. The strenuous labor of this father and son, cropping their own family manus, or birding section, would once have been accompanied by choruses of bird song. Now they found themselves working in silence. The careful culling of these mutton birds has never been wanton or wasteful. Maori code prescribes that each bird taken must be processed by its taker until ready for cooking. Because of this calculated, long-observed conservation, there has never been a visible decline in mutton bird population through birding. Though the swift killing of the bird may seem harsh, it's no harsher than for any animal used for human food. But the rats practiced no such conservation. They ate everything in sight, and multiplying unchecked, they were bankrupting their own food supply.
Well, actually saw very little of the rat. Mostly what we saw of them was the sign they left behind. In some of the old sheds, dried places, they had their nests there. If you disturbed them, you'd hear a scuttle and you might see the odd rat fly out. But they were really thick. Everywhere they could get, they were there. I believe the rats really got to the nest more than the adult bird, as far as the saddleback goes. Once the food supply got down a bit, they were made a big impression on the foliage. All the young shoots of the tupari. They chewed them off. The bunui chewed them off at the ground level. And the island was very bare for quite a while.
The rat population eventually declined to a sustainable level. The reason was obvious. In their brief time of holocaust, the rats had eaten out the island.